Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Brother Naba'a Muhammad, editor-in-chief of the Final Call newspaper and host of Straight Words with Naba'a Richard Muhammad, B.J. Murphy, and James G. Muhammad, which airs live Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. to midnight Central Time on WBON AM 1690 in Chicago. It's also live streamed through the iHeartRadio app, and it is also available on WBON.com. I wanted to do a commentary or give you an analysis of what you're actually seeing when you're looking at the spreading of protests against the genocide in Gaza at college campuses around the country. What I want to talk to you about is what CNN is not showing you, because I think whenever we consume news and information, whenever we are deluged by images, we have to be able to analyze what we're looking at, and we have to be able to understand why we are seeing what we're seeing. I wanted to start with today. There have been growing protests across the country at the University of Southern California on the West Coast, continued protests at Columbia University and other places on the East Coast, and now colleges in between. The protest arose as students, like many people in America and many people around the world, have grown fed up, disgusted, and find themselves unable to contain their moral outrage and their righteous anger at the destruction of Palestinian lives in Gaza. Over probably now 34,000 Gazans have been killed, mainly women and children. And Gaza stands on the brink of famine, or rather is entering into famine right now, according to the United Nations and other agencies. This is important to know because Israel's slaughter of Palestinians is only made possible because your tax dollars as an American citizen are going toward weapons and going toward Israel's all-out destruction of human life. So part of what you're seeing in terms of mainstream media coverage of these protests is an attempt to get away from that issue. It is an attempt to deflect you and redirect you away from the loss of life in Gaza, and now to totally flip the script, so to speak, so that the victims are not suffering people in Gaza, where a majority of the buildings have been destroyed, hospitals have been destroyed, civilians have been assaulted. Now they're talking about the finding of mass graves in Gaza. They're talking about the Palestinian agency, UNRWA, which is a lifeline, food and medical attention and education and all these things that the Palestinians need, was accused by Israel of harboring those who are terrorists, quote unquote. But the United Nations really recently came back with a report over the last few days, which said that after an extensive investigation, that the United Nations panel did not find those things to be true and found UNRWA to be a pretty reputable group, and Israel has not come forward to give proof of these allegations. Remember, brothers and sisters, these are just allegations. They're not provable facts, or proven facts, rather. But when you see something over and over and over again on mainstream news, when you see it in newspapers, when you see it on the internet, when you see it in social media posts, there's a tendency to associate these different reports with being actual facts, and most often they are not. So, one, the coverage of the protests and the way they're being covered to divert you away from the continued loss of life of Palestinians in Gaza and in Israel. That's number one. Number two, what you're seeing is a tremendous amount of power and influence being manifested and represented and wielded by the Jewish community and Zionists. You don't get on major media, every channel, basically, with the same line, with the same storyline that these protests across the country are making Jewish students feel unsafe and making Jewish students feel tension on campus. We know, brothers and sisters, that, and we teach our children, that they're going to have to exist in a world where everyone does not agree with them. And if someone is to challenge your thinking or to challenge your understanding, that often brings what? Tension. Because now you're being taken into a place where you're not used to being taken into. The Jewish community, Jewish lobbyists, Jewish organizations, Jewish student groups are not used to seeing the level of opposition that they're seeing now when it comes to what is happening in Gaza. So now there is a response. And I want you to understand, brothers and sisters, this is not just an organic response. This is not just something that happens because it happens in terms of the how the Jewish community is reacting to what they're seeing. And I want to really share with you something that I've been writing about for the last couple of weeks, or at least referring to over the last couple of weeks in editorials in the Final Call newspaper, because I think it is vitally important that we see the truth and that we see and hear perspectives that the mainstream media is not giving us. So we need different, we need alternative, we need a counter narrative so that we can understand what is really going on. So I want to deal with a couple things. One, some days ago, Robert Kraft, who is a Jewish billionaire, and he's the owner of the New England Patriots as well as other considerable businesses. He is an alumnus of Columbia University in New York, which is where these protests kind of started. These protests against Israeli policy, and calling on universities to do things like divest from Israel in support of Israel, etc. Well, Mr. Kraft, who by all accounts is a powerful man, he came out pretty strongly saying he would not financially support Columbia University because of these protests on campus. He also essentially called for professors to be quote unquote reined in or essentially fired for their criticism of Israel and the genocide in Gaza. And in something that you will see over and over again, he did a kind of double move. So on the one hand, he talked about students being allowed to protest, but then he talked about students being held accountable and his opposition to students wearing face coverings. Well, all of that is covered by the democratic right to protest, which is supposed to be especially enshrined on college campuses as places of learning, as places of development, as places where young people come and they are exposed to ideas. They are exposed to perspectives that they have not been exposed to. So the college campus is something of a laboratory to test ideas and activity, and then to have vehicles by which your political views, your social views can be explored and then expressed through protests and other means. Now, what we saw in particular at Columbia, as CNN reported on April 22nd, that there were more New York City police officers on hand than protesters. So where was the danger, right? So then later you had pro-Palestinian demonstrators, including faculty members rather, at New York University and Yale, arrested as universities bowed to pressure. Remember, in the last few months, we've had two major college presidents be forced to resign. Now, today, which is April 24th, you've got the leader or the speaker of the House, Republican, going to New York, going to Columbia to, quote unquote, meet with Jewish students and call for the resignation of the president of that university as well. So what do I mean when I say that this is not a organic response? This is not something that just popped up. I want to refer you to something that I think is very important. I want to read something. Check this out. As worldwide protests escalates over Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, academic freedom and free speech are under an all-out attack on university campuses in the United States. Not just from university administrations and pro-Israeli groups, but now directly from the highest levels of the Israeli state. Did you hear that? Let me continue to read this. In a story that has been largely ignored in the Western press, the Israeli news website, Ynet News, one of the largest outlets in the country, reported that the Israeli government has launched what appears to be a wide-ranging campaign to harass, intimidate students, faculty, and administrators into silence, wrote William I. Robinson in a Truth Out report published January 23rd. He writes, such censorship has swept across the U.S., and some professors have even lost their jobs. Mr. Robinson also noted that suspension at, quote, Columbia University of the campus chapters of Jewish Voice for Peace and Student for Justice in Palestine was the most publicized case, but such crackdowns on pro-student activism have taken place at many universities, and now it is spreading as we see now police officers at these different schools really breaking up and violating students' rights to protest. And I would ask the question rather. Many of these schools, basically, they got maybe 3 weeks before they end for the semester. Why is it so important to have such a show of force on these campuses against students that have the legitimate right to protest and who have the right to be heard. Why is that? Well, it is because this operation that I just quoted to you, which is not emanating from America, but it is actually emanating from the state of Israel. Not conspiracy theory, absolute fact. So let me get into another thing that I want to quote from Mr. Robinson's article because I think it's very important. So Mr. Robinson continues to write, Israel will identify leading donors within the Jewish and Israeli communities and enlist them in the struggle to serve as a lever of pressure on university heads to act against anti-Semitism, quote unquote. Right? Exactly what you're seeing with Mr. Kraft and others who are now saying to these universities, we are not going to endow you, we are not going to financially support you unless you stop these protests. The other thing is, another thing rather, when you are looking at these Jewish young men and women going on places like CNN, talking about how they feel and talking about how they feel besieged. I want to point out that during the Black Lives Matter protests a few years ago on college campuses, where black students were being literally harassed, literally being threatened, literally being humiliated, literally being targeted, not just by fellow students, but by faculty and campus security at these schools, dealing with issues that they have been dealing with for a long time. When you talk about feeling unwelcome on campus, when you talk about feeling tension on campus, nobody has felt that more. Nobody has felt that more than black students. So when you see many of these Jewish students, they are not necessarily just organic people. Because as Mr. Robinson writes, there are a number of groups specifically set up to operate on U.S. university campuses. Among them, the David Project. These are all pro-Israel groups working, organizing, plotting, and targeting folks. Groups like the David Project. These are student groups or groups set up to operate on university campuses in the United States. The AMCHA Initiative, Canary Mission, the Israel on Campus Coalition, and Students Supporting Israel. These organizations have specifically targeted for persecution scholars, academics, and students who speak out on and off campuses against Israeli policies and for Palestinian rights. Lastly, I'm going to close with this from Mr. Robinson. The playbook of tactics employed by the Israeli lobby include character assassination, selective misquotation, the willful distortion of the record, the fabrication of falsehoods, and a complete disregard for truth, gaslighting, blacklisting targeted individuals, political and economic blackmail, and even threats of violence, Mr. Robinson notes. Does that sound familiar? It should. It should sound very familiar, in particular to members of the Nation of Islam, because that is exactly how they have targeted the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the nation by using these same nefarious, ugly, underhanded tactics. Character assassination, selective misquotation, willful distortion of the record, fabrication of falsehoods, a complete disregard for the truth, gaslighting, blacklisting individuals, political and economic blackmail, and even threats of violence. The minister has been subjected to all of those things. One of the other things, and I'm going to get back to Mr. Kraft, and I'm going to keep going. Mr. Kraft, again, this Jewish billionaire businessman, right? He told CNN that Jews are the first targets, and then blacks and other groups are targeted. I beg your pardon. Black students have been and remain the leading targets of hate crimes at colleges and universities. Not only are they stalked, ridiculed, and harassed and attacked by white classmates, they suffer the same mistreatment and danger at the hands of professors, staff, and campus police. I'm going to read to you now. This is from a study done by Dominique J. Baker, who was at the University of Delaware, and Talani Britton, who was from the University of California. Their joint paper is entitled Hate Crimes and Black College Student Enrollment. It was published last year, and they looked at whether these anti-black attacks were driving black students to go to HBCUs. But the researchers noted, quote, black individuals are the most frequent target of racial hate crimes. They also note that since 2015, college campuses saw a 25% increase in the number of reported hate crimes. I want to read you a quote from them, and then we'll move on. Quote, while the number of reported hate crimes in the United States increased, particularly in large cities, where the number of hate crimes reported in the 10 largest cities rose by 12.5% in 2017. Rates of other types of crime were falling, they wrote. So just remember, brothers and sisters, the vast majority of hate crimes perpetrated in America are perpetrated against black people. And you find law enforcement, you find institutions such as campus police always hesitant to try to find or justify hate crimes being charged against people that attack black people. So I want us the other thing in on Democracy Now!, which is a good alternative outlet for news. So again, I want to direct us to places where we can get more and get different. Get out of the mainstream media loop. If you're in that loop, it's like you're in the Matrix. But on Democracy Now!, a student leader said Columbia University President Manoj Shafiq's, quote, claims of an unsafe environment on campus are contradicted by the generally calm and productive atmosphere among the protesters. So this student leader added that the school's heavy-handed response, including suspensions and evictions, is being seen as an intimidation tactic by organizers. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, and remember, what you are seeing in mainstream media, what you are reading in mainstream media reports are part of a concerted effort. And you can go to finalcall.com and get my last 2 or 3 editorials where I really explore these issues and explore what is happening in Gaza, what is happening with Israel, which was recently given billions of dollars again, now in aid, billions, while our communities suffer, while our communities are neglected. So these are not, as I said, organic. These victims that you see, quote unquote, Jewish victims they are not just people who pop up. You have groups, organizations that very often offer these young people to media so that they can talk about their quote unquote experiences. But brothers and sisters, what is it that you're not seeing? One, you're not seeing attacks on Jewish students. You're not. You're not seeing any definitive arrest reports from somebody who restricted the movement or the freedom of Jewish students, which we're absolutely against. Everyone in a civilized society has the right to express their views. No one should be threatened physically because they have different views. We don't believe in that in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We believe in justice for all, regardless to race, creed, class, or color. Okay? We believe in peace. We believe in mutual respect. But the reality is the Zionist lobby and these Jewish organizations have no respect for any of that. They are so vicious that they will even attack, undermine, and try to destroy Jewish groups. Listen to me now. They will try to destroy Jewish groups that speak out against evil of the Israeli state. So what is it that you're not seeing? One, you are not seeing these protests that are happening on these college campuses are organized. Are organized. They are planned. They have people who are the spokespersons. They have ideas behind what they do, what they are doing. They have strategies. They have demands of the institutions that are charging them thousands of dollars in terms of how they want to impact those institutions, right? But you're not hearing from the pro-Palestinian groups. They're not being given the opportunity to express their views. They're not being given the opportunity to talk about any abuses that may have taken place at the hands of police. They're not having the opportunity to talk about what it's like to have their peaceful protests disrupted. Many of these students have been arrested, and some of them are being threatened that they might face legal action for protesting on campus in America today. Not for assaulting anyone, not for hurting anyone. So the blunting of the pro-Palestinian voices, that's not new. This is something that's been going on and on and on and on and on. You just had it out. You just had it out on the West Coast, where you had a beautiful Muslim American sister who was the valedictorian of her class. And the school decided that they would not allow her to deliver her speech because some Jewish groups and organizations did not want to hear from her because she spoke out against the slaughter of Palestinians. She also spoke out against others. The student is Asna Tabassum, who is Muslim and who is a Muslim American student at the University of Southern California. And she's been demanding justice for Palestine. But the class of 2024 valedictorian has been banned from speaking at her own graduation. This is what she said in terms of what this day should mean to her and others. Quote, this is our sister speaking. Although this should be a time of celebration of my family, friends, professors, and classmates, anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian voices have subjected me to a campaign of racist hatred because of my uncompromising belief in human rights for all, she said. Then she continues, USC administrators informed me that the university will no longer allow me to speak at commencement due to supposed security concerns. I am both shocked by this decision and profoundly disappointed that the university is succumbing to a campaign of hate meant to silence me, she said. So, brothers and sisters, we're going to wrap this up. But I want to close with this, and I think I referred to it somewhat earlier. But these protests, if you will end soon because school is coming to an end at college campuses and universities. Why is it so important to crush, mischaracterize, malign, criminalize, and demonize these protests? It's because the Zionist lobby, these organizations in the Jewish community, are determined to turn the tide of public opinion. And if they can't turn the tide, they at least want to put up this other narrative, this other view, this false representation of reality. That while thousands of Palestinians die and even more starve, that somehow Jewish people are the victims in this. So we need to be aware. There's power here. Power is being exercised. Power is being organized. And that power is Jewish power. And sooner or later, look for some Negroes to come out. Because they're already doing it. Look for some Negroes to come out. And after being called out by their masters, they will have to speak now and condemn rightful protests. They will have to condemn crimes against humanity that are happening right in front of our face. So this is Brother Naba'a Muhammad, Editor-in-Chief of The Final Call. And I want you to go to finalcall.com and support that important work. We have to strengthen and expand our voices. I'm also the host and creator of Straight Words with Naba'a Richard Muhammad, BJ Murphy, and James G. Muhammad, which airs live Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. to midnight Central Time on WVO and AM 1690 Black Talk Radio, Chicago. And you can get show archives and replays and other content at straightwords.com. So brothers and sisters, thank you for tuning in. Please share this. Please follow us. Please like us and let us know what you think. May Allah bless you. Let's keep standing for truth. Assalamu alaikum.